Grassroots movements typically start with people that aren't activists or advocates. They're not really political in any way. So there's me as a baby. I was born September 19th, 1972 to a young single Métis woman from Cold Lake. Her family was from Cold Lake. She was going to the university in Saskatoon. And she wanted me to have a good life with a loving two-parent family. And so she gave me up for adoption, much to the sadness I found out much later from my grandparents. My grandmother was a Cree lady. My grandfather was Métis. I've never met my birth father. He was a Scottish gentleman who was in the Canadian military, and when she told him she was pregnant, he never called her again. But that's okay. I ended up in a great family well, actually, my mother and father adopted me. They were told they would never have children of their own. So my mother had 3 miscarriages. They adopted me, and then they had 5 more children. So I think I'm a bit of a good luck charm. At least that's what I try to tell myself anyways. I grew up in Saskatchewan, all across the southern part of Saskatchewan. My dad worked for the wheat pool. He had a trucking company for a while. Then he worked in the oil patch. So pretty much every little teeny dinky town in southern Saskatchewan I have lived in. We lived in towns where when my family moved in, the population doubled. One place we moved in Horizon, Saskatchewan, didn't even have any plumbing, so that was interesting. It was a 2-bedroom house with a family of 6. So my career has primarily been in oil and gas since I moved to Alberta in the late 90s, and that's sort of where my journey here sort of started. It was during 2019, I believe it was, when C-69 and C-48 came in. And I was seeing people that I cared about and people that were working in my industry losing their jobs and losing their homes. And, you know, men were coming into my office handing me their resume with tears in their eyes because they were going to lose their house or they didn't know what they were going to do. And now, of course, being in the Alberta oil patch, I know that we have one of the safest, most environmentally friendly and efficient oil and gas industries in the world. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me why we were being punished for it. I couldn't figure out for the life of me why all of our politicians weren't traveling all over the world shouting this from the rooftops and trying to sell our products around the world. And instead we were being vilified and shamed for it. So I joined a little group. I sought out a little group in Medicine Hat, and we became the Yellow Vesters, and we went to 13th Avenue by Tim Hortons and held signs up once a week. Yeah, so I joined a little local group in town. We called ourselves the Yellow Vesters, and we went out and protested on 13th Avenue every week, holding signs. Sometimes we get honks, sometimes people would join us, sometimes we'd get the old Trudeau salute, and that's okay. I mean, everybody is entitled to their opinion. We're all about free speech. So that was sort of my journey in beginning this whole thing and starting to follow politics a little bit more and a little bit more. It was about the time of the sponsorship scandal when I personally woke up to some of the stuff that was going on in our country because I didn't care until then. I mean, politics is boring, I thought. It was hard to understand, and I just didn't care. I just assumed that the government was there to look after me and my family like I was brought up to believe they were. And of course, you know, the fallout of the sponsorship scandal was sort of really eye-opening for me because nobody has gone to jail yet, and they won't. We've also watched the Trudeau government go through scandal after scandal after scandal with absolutely zero accountability. So I have to put that picture of Jason Kenney in there. So he's going to hate that one day when he sees it. And it was also in 2019 during our provincial election when I decided to stop complaining and do something about it and get involved. So I joined my local MLA's campaign team and I went door knocking and helped out in the office where I could. And obviously that was also supporting Jason Kenney. And I didn't really know what to think of Jason Kenney. Personally, I thought it was really strange that this MP from Ottawa was just going to give up everything and race back here and save Alberta from Rachel Notley. And I mean, I make this joke a lot, but we literally could have ran a cardboard box in that election and it would have won because we needed to get rid of Rachel Notley. But anyways, I thought that was a little bit suspect. But you know, as time went on and I was working on a campaign, I wanted to believe him. He came to Medicine Hat, I met him, he shook my hand, and I listened to what he had to say. And I wanted to believe him so badly that he was gonna fight for Albertans finally and put his foot down. I just didn't know that that meant harshly worded letters every other week to the Prime Minister with absolutely little to no action. And then of course we saw how that all turned out in the end also. So for me, during the pandemic, my husband and I actually, at the very early onset, we both were laid off of our jobs on the same day. And we'd planned a trip out to Manitoba to go see my daughter, who we got there and found out she was pregnant. So we spent most of the pandemic out in Manitoba because we weren't gonna sit in the middle of Medicine Hat and do nothing. At least on the farm, we could go be productive. We helped on the farm. Obviously, I helped with my grandchildren. I helped my daughter. And we lived there primarily through most of the pandemic until we were offered our jobs back in October of 2021. We both were offered our jobs back and we made this decision to come back to Alberta. And it's funny because that's literally what we did. We moved back at the beginning of November, I think lived with my parents for a few weeks, moved into our house a week before Christmas, and then the convoy started 2 weeks later. So even when I got home from the convoy, my house still looked like two college kids had just moved in and dropped all their boxes and left them all over the place. We hadn't even got settled in yet. But I got back to work and started back at Step Energy, which is where I was working prior to all of this. And throughout this whole thing, you know, this was the problem. People couldn't talk openly about it. I mean, you would only know how other people felt if you read their body language or if you were very close with them. I mean, we know that this tore families apart. It tore relationships apart, friendships apart. So we had to be very careful during this time, feeling people out as to who we could talk to and who we couldn't talk to about this, you know, about how we really felt about it. I know I worked in an office that was very vaccine friendly and actually very vaccine friendly. The lady that was my coworker was very much a CBC watching lady that believed all of that stuff. And I remember the CEO or the CAO and the Reeve came in one day because I was very honest. I've tried to always be respectful, but I was very honest about my stance on what was going to happen. And the CAO and the Reeve came in one day and Jason says, "So Tamara, about that vaccine." And I said, "I'm not getting it." And he said, "Well, that's okay." Look, at this time they were talking about mandating them for all the municipalities in Manitoba. And he said, "Well, that's okay. You can probably just do a test." And I said, "I ain't doing that either because I'm not sick." And the CAO, assistant CAO laughed and she's like, "Are you gonna quit? Does that mean you'll quit?" And I said, "No, you're gonna have to fire me." I was not playing that game. Absolutely not. And my husband and I decided very early on that we were not participating in that program. And I don't know about you guys, but even looking back today, when I think of all the stuff that happened to us during COVID, I can hardly believe it. It just seems like a surreal nightmare, right? And then pile everything else that happened after that on top of it. It's been a wild ride, what can I say? And so the moment people decide to act, I had been obviously actively trying to find groups in my area to join so that I could do something. I don't know about you guys, but around our communities, and I know other communities, there were secret meetings where we would all leave our phones at home and meet somewhere and all jump in a vehicle and some vans and drive out to somebody's shop, right? Like, isn't that crazy that we had to do that? So we were going to some of those meetings and I just wanted to get involved. I was so frustrated. And of course, by this time, we were already hearing about a lot of cases of the vaccine injured, which is a whole other story unto itself. But the catalyst, the straw that broke the camel's back, was after 2 years of Justin Trudeau claiming that our truckers were heroes. He was likening them to war veterans or soldiers going off to war, bringing us our goods. That wasn't good enough. So after they'd pretty much laid these mandates out on just about every single profession, they decided to come for the truckers. Now the truckers drive truck in their rigs, usually by themselves. They don't interact with a lot of people, period. So obviously this was really suspect. And imagine how that's going to impact their income. They needed to have a vaccine passport to cross the border. And when you talk about, like, a lot of our major cities across Canada, especially in the east, are right along the border. So these guys are taking loads back and forth every day. So they needed to either produce a vaccine passport on the wildly popular ArriveCan app, or they had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Just like everybody else had to quarantine for 2 weeks. But I mean, you can't. Who can go without a paycheck for 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks? So a friend of mine actually contacted me. She ended up being on my finance committee, actually, one of the finance committee for the convoy. And she sent me a TikTok video from a gentleman by the name of Christopher Barber. And yes. And in that video, Mr. Barber was clearly frustrated, and he said he was advocating for a Canada-wide shutdown. He was saying to all the truckers, just doing a call out on January 25th, I believe was the date he'd used, he wanted everyone to just shut their rigs down. So I immediately contacted a friend of or an acquaintance, pardon me, that had been heavily involved in the 2019 United We Roll convoy that went to Ottawa in 2019, advocating for our oil and gas sector, by the name of Glenn Carrott. And Glenn sent me Chris Barber's number, and I called him up. We hit it off immediately. I found out he was from the same area of Saskatchewan where I was from, which I'd never met him, which is really weird. But anyways, and we hit it off immediately. And I said, look, you're going to need logistical support, you're going to need money, and you're going to need a Facebook or social media presence. And fundraising. And I said, my skills are organization, administration, and logistics. How can I help you? And I simply offered my support, and I will probably never do that again. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. And literally, that's how my journey started. I just wanted to be a supporter. I wasn't even planning to go on the convoy until the Friday before we left.